Well, it's Thursday, April 2nd, 33 AD. This is Maundy Thursday. Sometimes we refer to it as the Mandate Thursday, where Jesus in the upper room is going to give that new commandment to his disciples, that with the love that I have given to you, you also ought to love one another. This is a holy day. This is a high holy day. For us as believers, we see Jesus in the greatest of distresses possible, the most amazing anguish and suffering that we could possibly comprehend in the Garden of Gethsemane. But before we get there, we have to go to the upper room. You remember that Jesus secretly planned where that upper room was going to be, where the Passover was going to be held. And so Peter and John go into the city early, into Jerusalem early on the afternoon of Thursday of that Passion Week. They find the man with the pitcher of water on his head. They follow him into the upper room, and there they prepare the Passover Seder, that Passover meal. The rest of the disciples follow Jesus later in the evening, and they go to that upper room. And Judas now knows exactly where they are going to partake of that Passover Seder. So he knows where they're going to go grab those religious leaders and bring them back and arrest Jesus. But not before Jesus graciously takes a towel, girds himself with it, and washes Judas's feet and Peter's feet and the rest of the disciples. John 13 gives us this amazing picture of humble service that Jesus says, I will wash your feet. And then they partake of the Lord's Supper. Before he institutes the Lord's Supper, Judas leaves. Jesus says, what you have to do, go do it quickly. And Judas leaves. It's an incredible scene where Judas knows what he's about to do. He knows the anguish of what's happening. In fact, what's going to happen afterwards. He's going to say, I betrayed innocent blood. He's so filled with hate for Jesus, with hate for Jesus not fulfilling his self-centered desires. He says, I'd rather you be dead in this moment. And sin consumes him. The Bible says that the devil possessed him and worked with those desires that he had against Jesus to betray him. With Judas gone, Jesus is able to institute the Lord's Supper in the most amazing way, something that I cannot wait to partake of with you all again when we're able to gather together. They sing a hymn and they leave the upper room and they go into the Garden of Gethsemane. And you remember that incredible scene. There's just probably no bigger picture of the grace of God in the Bible for you and for me and his love for you and for me than in that scene in the garden, where Jesus 3 times cries out to his Father, Abba, Father, if there's any other way to save these people, please let this cup pass from me. Please, I don't want to have to go through with this. What's he terrified of? So many people so often think he's looking only to the crucifixion, to the physical agony of crucifixion. Now that's agonizing. It's one of the worst deaths imaginable. It was a perfected death for agony, for suffering, for public humiliation. But I want to submit to you, I don't think Jesus is afraid at all of the physical agony of crucifixion. In the Garden of Gethsemane, he's not afraid of even the relational abandonment with his own disciples who are going to scatter. He's not afraid of what the Jews are going to do to him. He's not afraid of what the Romans are going to do to him on the cross. He's terrified of what his Father is going to do to him on the cross. That's why he says, let this cup pass from me. That's a reference to the Old Testament where a cup of judgment was given for people to drink, the wrath of God poured out on sin, the punishment that you and I deserve for our sin. Jesus says, this is a cup that you've given for me to drink, but I don't want to drink it. I don't want to have to go through the agony of being separated from you and bearing your severe, just wrath on behalf of sinners. Is there any other way? And 3 times he's met with silence. There is no other way. And so he graciously and obediently responds, not my will, but yours be done. He said that for you and for me. He had a choice in the garden. Do I spare myself and not spare them, or do I spare them and thus give myself over to the wrath of God? And he answered by saying, I'm going to give myself for my people because I love them. Listen to what the author of Hebrews says in Hebrews chapter 12, verses 1 and 2. Therefore, since we have so great a cloud of witnesses surrounding us, let us also lay aside every encumbrance and the sin which so easily entangles us, and let us run with endurance the race that's set before us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the author and the perfecter of our faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is now seated at the right hand of the throne of God. The joy. That was the joy of obeying his Father, of glorifying his Father, but that was also the joy, the author of Hebrews says in Hebrews chapter 2, of bringing many sons and daughters to glory. Brothers and sisters, you are in the Garden of Gethsemane in Jesus' prayers. If you've ever wondered, does God love me? You don't have to look any further than the garden. When Jesus, in towering grace and majesty, says, I will drink the cup of God's wrath so that they never have to experience it. Brothers and sisters, live today in light of the mercy and grace and kindness of God, that he loves you and he gave himself for you. And he resolved in that moment on Thursday night of the Passion Week, I'm not running away from this. I'm running to the cross to win salvation and forgiveness for my people. That's a promise for you and for me. That's a beautiful picture of God's grace in that garden that you and I can cling to. Meditate on that today. Realize the love that God has for you today. And may it cause you to worship him with all gratefulness and joy and thanksgiving.